Today I've got a pleasure to talk to Stacey Kent, an American, British, a little bit, jazz vocalist. Stacey, you come to Poland with your latest album, released in 2007, Breakfast on the Morning Tram. Tell me, what would you call the major novelty of this recording?
It's interesting that you stumbled across American and British, and I think that that is an interesting point when it comes to this album, because thematically that one of the things that we talked about was I'm an American singing from the Great American Songbook, and yet the album has a very European flavor, primarily because Jim, my husband, Jim Tomlinson, my saxophone player, my producer, and I got together with the brilliant novelist Kazuo Ishiguro to collaborate on 4 of the 12 songs, and I think that that's what helped give the essence, the emotional universe of the album and the flavor of the album. And I think that behind it, it's my most emotional album, it's my most confessional album, it's the album of which I am the proudest. And I think that the idea of Breakfast on the Morning Tram, which is just this beautiful metaphor, is meant to stand for the things that we experience in our lives, the joy and the pain, the tremendous joy and the music that we want to make, and the sorrow that wants to make us, that drives us to make the music.
In the liner note for the album, you were cited as saying that this is the album when you're going to reveal yourself more than in any other previous recording. Does it have anything to do with the fact that Kazuo wrote the lyrics, and that here you expose most of the songs that are written for you, because you are well known as a fan of standards and you perform them really perfectly? So does it have something to do with the fact that he wrote the lyrics?
I think yes, and I think that everything about this album is about timing and how organic the whole process was, because, as I said, we weren't looking for it to do anything new with anybody. We weren't looking for a lyricist. He just arrived, and the 3 of us had this beautiful shared conception of the world and of music. So there was that, but it wasn't simply in the Kazuo Ishiguro, Jim Tomlinson songs that this revealing of myself showed up. I think that there's a long time between my last album and this. And you know what? I've grown up. I feel more mature, and I feel more able to express more of myself. And that's not to say that I wasn't being honest before. I think that I'm very choosy about the standards that I sing, and it's nice that you say what you say. I think that I'm always looking for music that is the right poetry for me.
Romantic places like Verona or Paris, they'll always lead you astray. You'd have to be a novice to ever trust Venice and those dreamy waterways.
You told you are very choosy when choosing the songs you are going to sing. You study languages and literature. What is the thing that attracts you to song? I mean, standard songs, for example. Is it lyrics or music, or a mixture of both?
Well, you are asking the question of questions, and you're right. I come from a literary background where not only did I study literature and language, but I also come from a tradition in my family of reading aloud. We used to have this tradition in my family where my mother would start a book, and she would read the first chapter, and then she'd hand it to me, and I'd read the next chapter, and then my sister would read the next chapter. I grew up in a world where we were always very playful with words and with story, and I realized, I think early on, even before I was a musician, that if I told a story, if I read the book, it was my story. It was from my point of view. And so when I do choose these songs, yes, I am looking at probably the text first. And that's not to say that I love the rhythm, I love the melody, you got to love it all. But I think that lyrically, that's what attracts me first. And I think that you can also be very open-minded in that, because you don't have to have lived that song word for word in order for it to fit you. Because in poetry, there is so much playfulness, and there is so much give. There is so much malleability to a story. So every one of these stories, when I sing them, I believe that they are my story. This is a fun job to have, because I'm not an actress, I'm a singer. And yet, for the 5 minutes that song lasts, you become that song, you become that story, and so does everybody else who's listening to it. You find something that you relate to. And I think that my studies as a comparative literature student is what helped make me understand that all the more as a singer.
There are also 3 songs in French. Why? What's your connection to French? I don't know, language, culture. What are these French stories about? As I don't know French, I don't know exactly.
Well, the stories themselves are perfect for the album because they talk about some of the themes that are there. For example, Samba Sarava, which comes from a man and a woman, a very poignant story. And I wish I had more time to tell you the whole story because there's a real reason why the story belongs on this album. But just very simply, the opening line is être heureux, c'est plus ou moins ce qu'on cherche, which means to be happy is more or less what we're looking for. And that's as fundamental as it gets. And through life, that is what we do. Kazuo Ishiguro's Breakfast on the Morning Tram is the same theme in that story. Let's get on the tram, let's eat, let's engage, let's meet other people, let's make ourselves feel soothed by the fact that everybody else around us is going through what we're going through.
This is no whim of the moment, I want you to realize. Let's go to that palace made of ice. Let's you and me go away to the ice hotel. The Bahamas are all booked out, and that's just as well. I don't think we're quite ready for Hawaii or Tahiti, and when we will be, only time will tell.
Much difference between singing standards, a song previously performed by someone else, and taking it as yours, than singing songs that were written with you in the author's mind.
This is interesting. I mean, in a sense, there is no difference because once I take the song and it belongs to me and I've extracted from it what is here, then there is no difference. And let's take Wonderful World, for example. This is a song that hasn't actually been recorded that many times, but so thoroughly belonged to Louis Armstrong. And it's a song that is so simple and so pure and full of, again, the joy that all the beautiful things in life have to bring and the sorrow and the sadness. I think of it as quite a sad song, really. And when Jim, who's producing this album, said to me, this is so completely your song and your life story. If anybody knows you, I know you, and you must sing this song. I think it took me a little time to listen to it no longer as Louis, but as just the text. And suddenly, or eventually, it started to sink in that this song really had to be a part of the repertoire. And the way in which we arranged it was very sparse and very tranquil, and we just let it stand on its own. And I think that in answer to your question, because standards are often sung and played a lot before you, I think sometimes one of the dangers is that you can think, well, how do I make this my own? What do I do? You don't want to panic. In fact, rather than trying harder, you kind of step back and try a little softer and allow the song just to be. Because I'm essentially a storyteller. I don't want to change the words around or change the harmony around. I don't want to do too much of it. The second that I sing it, it is going to be mine because it's my point of view and my personality, and none of us are the same. It already is original, and I think that this is why this theme, Jim and I play with this so often, try softer, not try harder, is what helps us in just sitting quietly with the song and realizing that it can evolve into this entity that belongs to us.
You mentioned your husband, Jim. We know that you have been working with him for some 15 years or now. Tell us something more about other members of your band and the way it is playing with them.
This is by far my favorite band that I've ever had, and I've had various bands over the years. It's one of the things that I think about a lot with Jim and I as band leaders in this band is that good chemistry counts for so much, because the world is full of great musicians, and I say this all the time, you can find great musicians everywhere, but your responsibility is find people with whom you really lock in, when you really get each other. That's the magical moment. So the band now comprises Graham Harvey on the piano, who's just a beautiful musician and very open-eared and open-hearted and open-minded, and he plays so beautifully. And Dave Chamberlain on the bass and Matt Skelton on the drums, who is the most coloristic, perfect drummer for a singer. He loves to play the drums with song. He might as well be the singer. He sings songs when he drums, and it's just perfect accompaniment. John Paracelli plays the guitar the same sort of way. And I think this is a group of people, and Jim, of course, who get each other, who love to play with each other. I look around when we're doing the gig, and it's so exciting because, yes, we've recorded together, and these songs have traveled with us on this tour, and yet it's growing all the time. It's evolving all the time. And to watch these people enjoy each other's playing so much is a very exhilarating feeling. So I love this band.
This is your debut with Blue Note, yeah? Tell me something more about the cooperation, how you feel about it.
This is the greatest thing that's happened to me, really, because I think Blue Note is a wonderful label. I think that they are, of course, a legendary label, but it's not simply that. They are very important in this industry, but first and foremost, their artists' voice counts. So when I sat down with them, and I sat down with a lot of labels when I left my first label looking for a new home, and you could tell that they were kind of sizing me up. You know, what can we do with her? How are we going to make this bigger? There was something slightly cynical about it. There was never anything cynical about Blue Note. I will remember so well the day they came to see me in Paris. I opened the Paris Jazz Festival a couple of summers ago, and they just said, "We love what you do here, and we just want you to do it at Blue Note." And that was it. Just come and do it with us. And when we sat down and told them our ideas for this album, they said, "This is wonderful. Go and make this album." And in fact, one thing I have to say about them that was brilliant was that we were supposed to make this album last year because we signed the contract. And they said, "Okay, let's go. Let's make the album." And we said, "You know what? We've been touring so much. We need time to create this album out of the quiet. We need to run to the mountains." Jim and I live in the mountains when we're not touring. And we said, "We need a few months because we know if you give us this time off, we will make the album you want us to make. If we make it now, we won't." And they heard this, and instead of saying, "We need this now," they said, "Go." And when we came back, we gave them the record. We didn't know what they were going to say, and they said, "This is beautiful. This is just what we wanted. Thank you." And so the relationship has been very good. Now, I've got to say that that's not always a perfect story in the music industry. You don't always get an artist happy on the label, and I haven't always been happy on the label. And yet with Blue Note, I have to say that they've come along in my career at a time that was just right. So I'm glad that this album is on their label because it's the one I'm proudest of anything I've ever recorded, and so it really belongs at Blue Note.
Okay, yeah, this cooperation proves very fruitful. Stacey Kent, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
This is where I want to be, here with you so close to me until the final flicker of life's ember. I who was lost and lonely, believing life was only a bitter, tragic joke, have found with you the meaning of existence. Thank you so much.